No, that's okay. That's totally fine. Okay, so thank you so much to the conference organizers for inviting us here and for accepting our proposal. What we'll be talking about today is problem-based learning in the international classroom. So I'm Rebecca Huxley. Sorry, my camera isn't working at the moment, but we also have with us Dr. Salha Tawati. Salha, would you like to say hello?
Hi everybody, and thank you for accepting our application and for inviting us for this workshop.
And we also have our dear Mr. Liam Lawrence. Would you like to say a big hello, Liam?
Hello, thank you very much for having me here.
Okay, so this has been very much a group effort today, and the research we've done regarding this. And we'll talk a little bit about our research in a little while. So I'll just go over like the structure. We have some slides to just introduce PBL, and then of course we'll have a session whereby you guys will actually have a task to focus on, very much in line with the nature of PBL. So I'll be talking, first of all, a little bit about what is PBL, and then Salha will talk to us a little bit about the process for PBL for the students and how the students experience PBL, what it is they need to do. Liam will then talk through the challenges of PBL for tutors, because with every teaching approach, no matter how good we may think the teaching approach is, there are obviously some challenges to implementing it. I'll talk a little bit about the international angle. This is also when I'll mention a little bit about the research that we have been doing. It is very much a work in progress. Hopefully in a future conference, we will present the results of our research. And then Salha will talk about the instructions for the workshop task. So that will include the workshop problem statement and the workshop objective. Then you guys will be in breakout rooms. We have a task for you to complete. And during that time, you'll be sharing knowledge, doing a little bit of research, brainstorming, and then we will be coming back to the main session to discuss what it is you guys have all been discussing in the breakout rooms. Again, we'll elaborate more on those instructions, or Salha will, a little bit in a little while. I just want to say before we do begin that we've changed the objective. So the workshop objective of the slides of our workshop today. So the information on the slides is a little bit different, but it's not a big difference. It's not a huge difference, and we'll explain as we go on. So if you have a question at any point, or anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to just ask questions. So problem-based learning, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that all of you are at least partially familiar with what problem-based learning is, but just to go over what that is. So problem-based learning is an approach that was developed by Barrows in the 1960s. And in this approach, you would present students with a problem. Now, this would be a problem that is a naturally occurring problem within the discipline of the students. The students then have to identify what it is that they need to know in order to solve the problem. And then they would rely on academic, reliable resources, as well as their pre-existing knowledge, and they would use what they've learned from those sources and their pre-existing knowledge to try to solve the problem, the session problem. So this is very different from current teaching approaches, so very different from the one-to-one didactic transmission of knowledge with traditional teaching approaches. And it even differs from current active learning strategies that we have so far, because in this way, it's very inductive. You present the students with the problem, and then they have to define what it is they need to know and come up with solutions to solve that problem. So in this way, PBL is entirely led by the students. The students work together in small groups, and the role of the tutor is not to just talk, is not to just lecture, but instead the lecturer is more like a facilitator or a guide. Okay, so Salha, would you like to take us through the process with students?
Yeah, so continue from where Rebecca is mentioned earlier about the PPL is mainly about problems. So in PPL, the problem is the focus or stimulus for learning. So unlike the traditional way of teachings, where the teacher will start with instructions and then they will use the problem at the end of the instruction session to just evaluate or confirm the learning objectives. And instead, in problem-based learning, the session will begin with the problem, teaching facts and the skills in the relevant context. So the students in the problem-based learning, they will use triggers from problems or teaching scenarios to create their own learning objectives. Then the student will do self-learning or self-research before they return to the group to discuss and refine the acquired learning based on their searching or the answers or the main issues using reliable sources. So the main idea of the problem-based learning is that the problem is the vehicle for learning, and this will happen, or the processes of learning or PPL will happen over 2 sessions. The brainstorming sessions, where the student will be given a teaching scenario or a problem, and they will discuss use the triggers from these scenarios to identify the main learning objectives. And at the end of the session, they will end up by a list of the issues or the learning objectives that they want to do self-learning. And then between the brainstorming session and the briefing session, between of these 2 sessions, the student should do the self-learning or self-searching to identify the answers for these main learning objectives using reliable sources. Then they will come back for the debriefing session, where they will answer or discuss the main finding, and they will end up the session by providing a feedback or reflection on how it was the learning processes. So the ultimate game of problem-based learning is to empower the student with a variety of skills. These skills including problem solving, team working, critical thinking, and student be able to have like creativity to solve problems. So the processes for the students, we kind of adapt or try to use the Glasgow University steps. So at Glasgow University Medical Schools, the problem-based learning undertaken in 7 steps. So the first step is this student will identify the facts or problems. Then they will list the main issues, and then they will activate their minds by in the brainstorming sessions. And then the end of the session, step number 4, student will organize the main learning objectives or the generate questions that they will use for their research stage. So the steps 1 up to 4 is the brainstorming sessions. And then after they do the research stage, they will come to the debriefing sessions, where they will discuss their findings and the acquired knowledge that based on reliable sources. They will end up the session by reflecting on how it was the learning processes of this particular session. So each discussions, before we move to the challenging, just to mention one thing, each discussion is led by student chairperson, and the main idea from the discussion are recorded by a scribe. We'll move now to the challenges for tutors. Liam?
Yeah, no worries. So as you might imagine, problem-based learning is amazing, it's fantastic, but in terms of like actually practicing problem-based learning, there are lots of challenges that someone could face when doing it. Probably the biggest challenge is just trying to get the students on board in the first place. Also, things like group dynamics and personalities. What we found is, like, for example, if there's high introversion versus extroversion, or if there's just clashing personalities within the groups, that can lead to problems of actually having an effective session. Also, just experience with active learning or more student-centered learning approaches can bring a massive challenge in facilitating problem-based learning, particularly for us in a more international background, where we do have students that come from more teacher-led focus, and trying to get them to move away from that can be quite a challenge, which is why we've been investigating ways to improve this.
Okay, so as Liam has said, we're focusing mostly on the international context, and we're really in an ideal position to be looking at this because, as Liam said, in our college, it is an international college. We have access to a lot of international students. So a lot of the factors, the challenges that Liam covered, this does directly affect intrinsic and extrinsic motivation of students, which in turn will ultimately impact on the success of a PBL session. And it goes without saying, really, that as soon as we start thinking about the international context, we have some additional dimensions to consider. For example, the student's nationality, their culture, and their language skills, because all of these things are going to add extra dimensions to the PBL session, and it will ultimately also affect the success of the PBL session. Now, currently, there isn't actually a lot of research that looks at the international angle when implementing a PBL approach. So, for example, a lot of what we've got here from the source of Nadiak and Nebaho 2020, they talk about how all of these factors are highly likely to impact and may lead to difficult group dynamics. And all of this is quite speculative, simply because there isn't anywhere near as much literature that does focus on the international angle. So we did, as a group, we conducted some research. We did a 90-minute session with foundation students, which was designed entirely as a PBL session. This was a session led by Salha, Liam and I with the observers. This is very much a work in progress, but something that we did observe within the session is that certain groups tended to over-rely on their first language, and that this over-reliance of the first language really impacted on group communication, because in those groups, we did try our best to mix the nationalities, but as soon as students started to refer fact of over-rely on their L1, this led to the exclusion of other members. And this really did negatively impact on group cohesion in the session. So here I'm only reporting over-reliance in L1. You might be thinking, what about their culture? What about their nationality? Well, the session we didn't really have enough students within the class to make many conclusions on the basis of that. But these are all things that would be really good for us to look at when we repeat the study in a larger scale. But anyway, I will now turn the presentation over to Salha. She will go through the session problem statement, the objective, and the instructions. Salha.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, as Liam and Rebecca stated, the main challenging of having international students is how to help them or support them to make the transition into a new active learning using problem-based learning, and taking them from the the traditional way of teachings they use it to have. So the objectives of our session is to create facilitation strategy to help international students to address the problem statement in the teaching scenarios. So we'll be soon provided by Padlet link, and in this Padlet link under the green sections you will find teaching scenarios, and the main objectives for you is to create facilitation strategies to help international students to address the main problems in this scenario. Next slide, please. So the reminder of the session will be broken into 3 parts. Part 1, 2, and 3. Part 1 will be around 20 minutes, and in this part is the brainstorming session, where you will research and discuss the facilitation and strategies to help the international student to address the problem stated in the teaching scenarios. I would advise to use the reading materials in Padlet, and also feel free to use any additional resources if desired. Part 2 is the part 1 will take place in breakout room. Just to mention, the part 1 will be taken. You will be sending into breakout rooms where we will discuss the scenario and read the scenario, discuss the scenario, and share your idea and knowledge that you have learned to help the international student toward addressing the problem in the teaching scenarios. And I'm expecting once you are in the breakout room, you will be able to assign a chairperson and scribe for your group. So the chairperson is the one who will lead the discussion and make sure everyone is on a track during the discussion. The scribe person is the one who will record your main finding.
Just to say, Salha, sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
So if everyone here didn't have the time to have a look at the pre-reading materials, all of this will be available in a Padlet link. I'll be sharing the Padlet link in a moment. Also, the instructions for the session will be there. And before we put you into breakout rooms, I will share the screen so you can see the Padlet link as well, so that you know what we're talking about. So we're just showing you the overall instructions here, and then we'll show you the Padlet link in a moment with all the information. Okay, so Salha, do you want to continue?
Yeah, thanks. So part 2 is the discussion, is around 15 minutes. So you will return to the main room, and you will discuss your finding, and then we'll end up the sessions by the part 3 is around 13 minutes to reflect on your how do you find the PBL sessions. And just to let you know, you will there will also be like feedback form to complete at the end of the session. And as Rebecca said, more information about the instructions are available on Padlet. Rebecca will share the link with you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share just one moment to make sure that it is. Yes. So I will share the Padlet. Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen for the moment before sharing the link, just to explain a little bit about the Padlet link, because currently there's a lot of information here, but there is some semblance of organization here. So in advance of this session, there were pre-reading materials to help facilitate the task that you will be doing. So all of the yellow notes here, this is all the pre-reading materials. So the brainstorming session that you're all about to do, that involves any research. That can be discussion based on your pre-existing knowledge, or discussion based on any new knowledge you learn from the reading material. And we've included this all in the yellow notes. So all the yellow notes is the the pre-reading materials here. So everything you need to know, from what is PBL, to student roles, to what skills are developed in PBL, to the structure of a PBL session, all of that information is here in the yellow notes. While you're in the breakout room, if you forget what our problem session statement is, that's here in the red note. So the red note is the session problem statement. This is ultimately what we are working to address in this session. So you'll be addressing the session problem statement here in the red. The exact instructions for what you need to do are here in the purple Padlet. So for the moment, you will be in a moment, I should say, you will be in breakout rooms, and you will be discussing what kind of facilitation strategies we can use to help international students to address the problem statement in this teaching scenario, which is in the green. So the green here is the teaching scenario. So you'll spend some time in the breakout rooms reading through the information in the Padlet first. So here at the teaching scenario, we have some information about the class, such as the class size, duration, etc. We have the topic, which is safety of food additives. We have the learning objectives of the teaching scenario. And then we have the problem here. So that is described in the main part of the green note here. So please ensure that you read through this carefully.
Rebecca, sorry
yes?
for interruption. One thing to mention, I think we need to be assigned as a host to be able to send members into breakout room.
Oh, Paolo, is that correct? Do we need to be, or is that something that you will do? Will you be able to put everybody into breakout rooms?
So I think.
Hiya. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I can put people into breakout rooms randomly.
Yeah, it can be random. I haven't looked at how many people are here in the session, but
so there's 17. Shall we go for 6 or 5 or 6 breakout rooms?
I was thinking, yeah, sure. So yeah, that sounds about all right. Just before you put anyone into breakout rooms, the Padlet link is in the chat. Just in case you can't see the chat once you go into the breakout rooms, please ensure you've opened it, because if you forget what we're doing, if there's anything you don't understand, the amount of sessions I go to, we get put into breakout rooms and I think, what is it we're supposed to be doing? So everything is there. And also, just before we do begin, does anyone have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to ask? Anything you don't quite understand? Because PBL, it's not simple. Any questions at all?
Looks like so we all know what to do. I mean, I have to admit, because I had some text messages. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do, but I'm hoping people in my room will explain to me.
So yeah,
we have a question here from Cosma asking how many people per PBL group. Usually PBL is a small group teaching, so the size of the class could vary from 10 up to 20.
So in a large class, we would put students into groups of like 5 to 10, but I think maybe the question meant in this session. So
so we'll go for 4. I'm going to make
he asked about both.
Yeah, in this session we'll probably have 4 because that works well in a breakout room, I think.
Okay, so just to summarize, guys, ultimately we're working towards addressing the session problem statement in red. That's ultimately what we want to work towards, and we just have a teaching scenario for you to think about, and we're going to use that teaching scenario to give you guys a context, and you guys will be thinking about what kind of facilitation strategies can we use to help guide students to actually solving the problem in the scenario.
Yeah. So just maybe to add to this, in the real life PBL lessons, the student will be given such scenario, and they should base it on their existing knowledge to try to understand, brainstorming what they already know about safety food additives. And then they ended up the session by generating these learning objectives. So the student should end the brainstorm session by creating learning objectives, the one that we mentioned here above the scenarios. So your role as a facilitator in the class is to make sure the students are on the track, discussing the main learning objectives, and then they will be able to generate learning objectives that pretty much matching the one you as a teacher is familiar with.
Just an interesting question from Elisabetta in the question. So will each group be assigned a specific aspect of the problem? Well, in an ideal world, generally when we have a problem for PBL, if it's a more structured problem, then normally yes. But we went for a kind of less structured approach. So you're not necessarily going to have a specific aspect of the problem, but in your groups, you can decide in what way you're going to address that problem. So each group doesn't have a specific aspect of the problem. No, not in this workshop, but it is a good point to bring up. And if anyone's interested to know more about that, then in the yellow note entitled Types of Problems for Students to Solve, there's some interesting information there about that. So thank you for your question, Elisabetta. Daniel, so essentially, yes, practical ways of helping students to transition into BBL, yes, specifically like facilitation strategy. So how can we facilitate students to solve the problem of a PBL session? Okay. Okay, so are we ready to put everybody into breakout rooms? Okay, Paolo, just to say, we'll be coming through to the breakout rooms to act as facilitators.
Fab, and I will join one as a participant. Maybe I'll make, okay. But I'm so when you're in the rooms, and if you need to call me, you do have an announce feature, so you can announce and say, Paolo. How long do we have, by the way?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, so that will take us to 3:30.
Yes, so I think we would need to be slightly less time because plus the discussion, plus then. Yeah. So should we go for 15 minutes maybe? 15 minutes, fine. I will close at 25 past. Okay. Thank you, Paolo.
Thanks.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Okay, so we had, so Paolo, Salha and I had a little difficulty. We got out of our breakout room and then we were stuck in the main room. So then we couldn't go like between groups like we planned to.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I should have made you guys at least co-hosts. I don't know if that would have been better. I'm very sorry.
Yeah. That was actually our assumption that would be the case. But anyway, guys, so I see that there have been some new posts. Fantastic, guys. So Liam and Salha, would you like to initiate the discussion? And
yeah, so let's start with breakout room 2.
So who was in breakout room 2?
I think that was us.
Yeah. All right. Would you like to tell us about some of the ideas that you had?
Beatrice, our scribe, did a wonderful summary just for our room. Maybe she can do that again, please.
Would you like me to summarize what we came up with? Yeah, of course. Yes, so as you can imagine, sort of free-flowing discussion. So apologies if it's not particularly structured in the Padlet. But we started off with a discussion of some of our backgrounds in EFL, and obviously food is a very important cultural signifier and something that gets people talking. So we thought, Elisabetta thought it was a good idea to perhaps use that as a starting point for comparing notes and experiences concerning food safety, and linked to that, would therefore be important to make sure that the small working groups are as diverse as possible, but then that raises the problem of how do you do that? So trying not to be too prescriptive with how you organise people into groups, but trying to organise the international students so there's some sort of diversity. With that as well, we thought that it was important to make sure there was a diversity in terms of how students could report on their findings. So that skills that might be stronger based on different cultural national backgrounds were well represented. There's also an accessibility issue. So if a student feels more confident reporting verbally or in writing, they have both options. Obviously, we want to make sure there are very clear instructions for the students about ways that they can volunteer their ideas without being, again, too prescriptive, giving them lots of options, and doing so in a way that is welcoming and inclusive. We discussed the importance of pre-sessional activities to sort of so that students were understood PBL. However, there's a variety of take up with pre-sessional activities. So yeah, that's perhaps a challenge as well as an opportunity. We were talking about, just getting students to watch some videos. And a final challenge was sort of a discussion around how do we build a culture over a short period of time. So making sure that we have lots of multiple sessions maybe around PBL would be one way to try and help build a culture as quickly as possible. I hope that makes some sense.
Yep, and there's definitely some really good points here. So I'm just thinking about when you talk about the pre-sessional stuff, activities, help students. So I think somewhere in the pre-reading, in one of the various pre-reading points, it is pointed out that as students become more practiced and more used to PBL, that they will benefit from it more over like a substantial period of time. So. And see what else. Group dynamics. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we asked breakout room 2 to share their ideas, but if anyone from any other breakout room wants to comment on what breakout room has said or wants to add to what they've said at all, then please feel free to do so.
I can speak if you like.
Yeah.
We were in breakout room 4, and so we, based on the scenario and the students, and we didn't know, did the students know each other or had they worked together in a group before or any of that? And I mean, I think the very first step that has to happen is that students need to understand why we're putting them in groups. Why are we asking them to do this? What's the point? What are they going to learn? How do they work nicely in an intercultural group? Like what do they need to know about communicating with each other? Because some students will talk nonstop and some will not talk. And how do they among themselves, between themselves, how do they so they have some awareness of sociocultural differences. Do you know what I mean? So that they know that if somebody's quiet, that doesn't mean they don't understand that they're, they need to be able to draw each other out and facilitate the same way as a teacher would. They kind of need to know how to do that themselves as well.
I just want to say to that end, normally in a PBL session, the students would have pre-reading materials, and part of the pre-reading materials, for example, what Salha did for the session that she ran with our students, we included information about what PBL is and how it's structured. So going into the session, they kind of knew that they should respect the opinions of others and, et cetera, et cetera. So that, that could potentially work with what you've said. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I like your idea here is to make it clear to the students what is the expectations.
Yeah, for sure.
From the start. So what they are expected to do, what is the expectations from them and from you as well as a facilitator. So what they are expected to do and what is your role would be during the session. So this is very helpful to make it clear to the student. And I think also this will be inclusive in terms of a student who don't like things to be like surprising them with things, especially students who have like some neuro diversity or things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good to make it as an inclusive approach as well, to make the expectation clear for the student. This is a very good point. Thank you, Heather.
And I think the working in the mixed nationality, mixing up the nationalities is essential, clearly, because that's kind of the whole point, right? And I would also emphasize for the students the benefits of that diverse thinking, and that you get better solutions if you have mixed nationality groups.
Absolutely. Very good point.
What I was gonna add was, like, I'm quite happy that everybody has been able to identify that setting the expectations of the PBL is probably one of the most important things to keep in mind. But what I was going to share is, like, you could take a student-centered approach to it, where you get the students themselves to set up what the ground rules and what the expectations should be. So it's like the students negotiate with you as a facilitator what would be good behaviour. I know it's quite strange talking about university students like that, but what is good behaviour? What are the and also, like, getting them to think about, what are the benefits of doing the group-based work, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I usually do with students. You sort of go, it's just that sort of first question about how are we going to all work together? You guys sort it out.
What I was going to say is, like, I know I might get into time, but what I found when me and Rebecca observed Salha's class was, like, if students weren't playing ball in the groups, it was amazing to see that the chairs in the groups were calling them out. That the chairs were going, hold on, you're not doing anything. You need to do it. And I was, like, really amazing to see that Salha didn't actually have to, do anything. It was like the students were taking the initiative. They were taking their role seriously, which I thought was, like, really amazing. I was, like, quite skeptical that they would take it seriously.
Yeah, and this is Liam, this is very important point to mention, because this is one of the important skills that PPL should develop in the students, is to have these leadership skills, and this will be achieved by being a chair, and the role of chair will be changed every week. So every single student in the group will have the chance to be chair, where he had the student will have a chance to opportunity to develop their leadership skills.
I think what we discussed in our group was, self-policing. No, definitely. It's good to see the students are self-policing. But what I was going to say, what was I going to say? I was going to say something.
Feedback forum?
Do we have time for the feedback forum? I think they've already done a self-evaluation.
Yeah, there's a general self-evaluation form that Paolo has put in about the session itself. We could just use the feedback from that. But there is some reflection, because an important part of the PBL process is to actually reflect on your learning experience, to reflect on how you performed within the PBL session. So originally we were going to say, the groups are small, so it should only take you like a few minutes to kind of to reflect, to discuss in groups, to reflect. Paolo, what do you think? Do you think we could do like just a few minutes in a breakout room to give everyone time to just reflect on how they feel about their performance in the session? Oh, you're muted, Paolo.
Sorry. Yes, I can reopen the breakout rooms again. Is Vasya here? She's in a room on her own at the moment. So I can move.
Okay, so yeah, we really only have a few minutes, as Beatrice has pointed out. What we can do instead is because it was my plan to put the reflection points into the Padlet, so you guys can still reflect. And you can add, because you will still have the link, you can still access it. So if I just add the reflection points here, and then we can address Beatrice's question. So I'll publish the reflection here. These are kind of just points to think about, and you can think about this and maybe add to the Padlet later. It doesn't have to be right now, because as it's been pointed out, we don't have that time. And Liam has also shared the feedback. So to address the question we have here, how to get students to complete a reflection activity. Normally in a PBL session, we would devote some time, so like the final 10 minutes, and we ask them. So Salha, do you want to explain how you did it?
Mm-hmm. It is the 7 steps of PBL learning processes.
How exactly did you do it, Salha?
This will be last 10 minutes of the PBL sessions, the second session, and the last 10 minutes the student will do like individual reflections. This can be done verbally, so every single student in the class reflect in their experience. For example, the share will start with the share, who will reflect in how did they, or how the chair find the chair experience, then describe, and then every single member of the group, what are the challenges or the difficulties they faces, how did you find the scenario, are there enough sources for them to answer the main issues of the scenarios. This sort of questions, the facilitator is the one who asks these questions, and then there are too many options. One of the options is just 10 minutes at the end, and every single student reflect individually, could be verbally or providing a forum to assist their process or the learning processes of the PBL session.
Okay, so I'm also going to include the feedback form as well, created by Liam. So we would really appreciate it to all the delegates who have attended and who have participated in our session today, if you could take the time at some point to add a note whereby you address some of the reflection points, so how you feel that you performed, especially if you had a role such as chair or scribe. So you don't have to address all of these reflective points, but there are enough reflective points there for you, well, to have an adequate enough material, things to think about in your reflection. And I've posted the feedback form as well here, because that's also a part of a PBL session, is that at the end you would get students to fill in like a little individual like survey about their experience. So thank you very much, everybody. I don't know if we have any like last minute questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for sharing your experience of problem-based learning. I do encourage all of you to take a look at problem-based learning if you're not using it in your teaching. I think it's a great curriculum design. And thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you in 20 minutes for our next part of the active learning journey.